recognize most of you. I'm as tired as you are. You having a good weekend? Cool. Mark's always having a good weekend. How are you so awake all the time, Mark? He's always like wide awake, but also always has sunglasses on. So I'm going to do a talk here on my history of hacking. This came out of being harassed a lot after I became a penetration tester, where people asking me like, how'd you get to be a pen tester, man? I want to be a pen tester. Like, what should I do to be a pen tester? And my answer was always something like, well, you got to start hacking cable in 1986. So, like, do the time machine thing. Because everybody thinks that, like, well, these days they think like, oh, I'll go to college or whatever, or I'll get my SANS certification, and then I'll go be a pen tester. It's not really an entry-level job. It's kind of like how you can't just like go to school for astrophysics and then go be an astronaut. You have to be a Navy pilot for 20 years and then apply to be an astronaut, and then they only pick 7 of them or whatever. It's kind of more in that realm, and granted, there's way more of a need for pen testers than astronauts. But you get the point. And so my thing was like, look, I've been doing this since I was a real little kid. Like, I've just been into hacking and actually doing hacking. I don't know if that's the proper verb usage. Doing hacking? Anyone? And so I threw this together because I would like rant at people about like, man, back in my day, this was what I was doing. What were you doing, man, on your CNC? And so this is going to be a fun, like, trip through my life. It's all just autobiographical fun crap. And so feel free to heckle, laugh, ask questions, throw a hand up. It's going to be a good time. So who doesn't know me? Anybody know me? 2 people do know me? Okay. I'm Johnny Christmas. I am a GIACG pen tester. I have my CISSP. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a pen tester for a company called Red Leg International. We're kind of just like a boutique, all the way around security firm. Anything you need security-wise, we can pretty much provide it, with the exception of having somebody come to you and do the work for you, as in like do their mediation for you. I get asked that one a lot. Like, can you also come here and fix that then? And I'm like, no, that's why you have the people that you hire, that you give this thing to tell them what to do. And they're like, we don't have anybody who knows how to do that, and that's why you found all these things. And I think that's why a lot of you are here, because you want to be at least the people that can fix all of the things that I broke. So yeah, I promise you there's tons of work out there for you guys who are looking to do that. I personally am proud of my incredibly seriously vicious phishing campaigns. I hit people where it hurts. I get like 70+% click rates through my phishing campaigns. I get in a lot of trouble for them. I get companies' legal departments mad at me. I get companies' HR departments mad at me because I do things like send out notices that the company is canceling its family medical plans. Click here. Or we've unfortunately, due to last quarter's earnings, had to make serious modifications to our company bonus structure. Click here to review. Like anybody here who does phishing or plans to get into phishing, like money and family, those are the 2 things like everyone cares about. That's everyone's hot buttons. And the idea of phishing is like you want to evoke an emotional response so that they make poor decisions, like clicking on the link. And so money and family, pro tip. But primarily I rob banks. I have a lot of financial and medical clients. And don't put your money in a bank. That's all I can tell you. Your money's probably safer in a mattress like it was in the 20s than it is in the banks. These numbers are probably pretty low now. But speaker and trainer, I've been doing this since a lot for the past 3 years. But the first time I ever spoke at a conference was 2003 at Freaknik 8. Who even knows what Freaknik is anymore? Does anyone know if Freaknik still exists? Was out of Tennessee, I think. So I've been at this forever, as we'll get into. Who remembers the 3D printed TSA keys leak? Probably everyone in this room. That was a big deal. That was me. I was that guy. with, well, the team of other people, but I've been featured on Ars Technica, Gizmodo, Wired, Boing Boing, Fox News. I did do Fox News with no pants on. So I pulled the Dave Kennedy, and you put the big suit on and a tie, and you get it all presentable, because they just do it all over Skype now, and then you just leave your pants off. So I've been on Fox News pantsless. It was a good time. Hanging out with a band called Cruciform Injection now. You could find us on the YouTube and probably other places. And I was Time Magazine's Band of the Year 2006. Go ahead, look it up. I'll wait. One thing I did in this presentation is I put like a lot of little like links in here, which you obviously can't click now. You can try if anybody wants to come up. But I'll have the slides posted on my GitHub, and you can go through, and there's like a lot of rabbit holes for things that I just did not have the time to get into. And so I put links to like cool, like you guys can play the home game and see what I was talking about. And so I'll point those out as I go along. Yeah, you should absolutely trust those links, because it's got information about our new family medical coverage plan, and you need to make sure that you get your forms submitted on time, because a sick kid's an expensive kid. See, I don't even have kids, but I know that that would be a good joke for you guys, because you know that sick kids are expensive kids. What's it? All kids are expensive kids. Especially the ones I sell. Yeah. All right, why don't we start the video now? Oh. All right, good. Cool, thanks. Live streaming directly to the FBI. So like what is hacking? This is something that like is often debated here and elsewhere. And hacking, I subscribe to the old school definition of hacking from like when I was growing up, which was it's the uncovering and dissemination of previously unknown knowledge, basically figuring out how things work. Sometimes it's things that nobody knows how they work. Sometimes it's things that whoever made them doesn't want you to know how they work. And then, of course, the use or exploitation of that knowledge to gain new or additional functionality. And not necessarily to break things or to cheat people out of something, but to just take advantage of the new knowledge that you had found. And so the big thing to me, the big takeaway from this is the dissemination of that previously unknown knowledge. It's not just enough for you to figure out how something works and to do something with that knowledge that you found. It's really, really important to share that knowledge. And I would hope you would do it freely. I'm a big fan of just releasing everything for free, doing things to help the general public, because knowledge yearns to be free. So whenever you can't find out how to do something online, you've been Googling forever, you're just, even if it's just the dumbest thing, you can't figure out how a library works or something, and you finally figure it out, make sure you put that information out there somewhere. Don't be that dude on Stack Exchange who's like, never mind, got it. And then I Google for it and I find it and I'm like, cool, bro. And it's like 6 years old and he doesn't respond. Like, come on, man. So like, make sure that you're posting information somewhere. Like, have a blog. Like, if you got nothing else, have a blog. And even if you only post on it every 6 months, because that's the only time like you find out new knowledge, put it there, because then I'm going to Google it and find it, and it doesn't matter when it was posted or how often, like how popular your blog is or whatever. If you helped one person through that same situation, like if you had done that in person, wouldn't you feel real satisfied? Someone came directly to you and you're like, dude, no, I know how to fix that. Check this out. And you show them and now they know. And even though there's only one person, you're like, yeah. That's what your blog's doing. And it's unfortunately like, a lot of times people who go to your blog and they see that, they're not going to like send you an email like, hey, thanks for that. But you helped them and it worked, and you just kind of have to assume that you were helping people. But trust me, like I find out info on people's blogs all the time, and it's often like they'll post the error message they had and it's the same one I'm seeing, and they're like, here's how to fix it. It's not in the documentation. So please like make sure you're disseminating this knowledge freely. Even if you think like you're nothing and your knowledge is nothing, that's patently untrue. So let's start off about this was the first form of hacking that I could remember. Like my earliest thoughts in life was cable TV piracy. And we're talking analog cable TV piracy because I was born in the 70s. And I distinctly remember when analog cable TV came around. I watched the first MTV video broadcast. It was mind-blowing. It was probably like how people felt in the 60s with the moon landing. It was just crazy. We had all the family around the TV, and we turned it on, and we just sat there, and they played Video Killed the Radio Star. And it was the weirdest thing anyone had ever seen in their own home. Because music videos were even weird back then. And did you know they're still making music videos? That's a thing. They're on the YouTubes now. Yeah, like MTV had like the Video Music Awards again, and I was like, what are those for? No. MTV does not show music videos. Well, that I know of. I don't. Who's got cables? MTV still show music videos? Yeah, or are you sure that's not just like a really complicated like ad for some ad for a DVD of old music videos? All of your favorite hits from the 90s. It's just an infomercial. They fooled us all. So who knows who the character in that little square is? Oh, that's cool. I think that's like the most people I've ever had recognize that. Inside this country, which is really funny. Like I did this talk in Canada, and there was like 600 hands. Like, it's Max Headroom. I don't know if it's because he was British or what. Also Iceland, like immediately knew Max Headroom. Iceland also knows all about analog cable TV hacking, even though they have never had analog cable TV in their country. Like everyone there knew what I was talking about. Like, oh yeah, we knew all about that, and they were like giving me tips on it. Who knows what the screenshot's actually from? Yeah. So I threw a link to the Wikipedia article down there, but if you just Google like Max Headroom broadcast signal intrusion, you can find videos of it all over YouTube. So I saw this happen when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I'm watching Doctor Who on Channel 11, like you do when you're 8 or 9. And this just comes on, and it was terrifying. And it was some dude in this like huge Max Headroom mask, and he had this background that was all weird looking, but it wasn't like a digitally added background. It was like clearly like a big poster board that someone was just twisting like this. And he's overpowering the signal, it seems like, to broadcast over WTTWs, and so you can't really hear his voice, so his voice is also terrifying. And he's got, like, he starts throwing things at the screen, and at one point, like, someone starts whipping his butt with a fly swatter. So go on YouTube and look up Max Headroom broadcast signal intrusion, or WTTW broadcast signal intrusion, and then imagine that you're 9 years old on a Sunday watching Doctor Who, like the old Doctor Who, and then like, this is what you're exposed to. Like, forget swearing and boobs, like this messes you up as a kid. Cable was analog. And because it was analog, that meant it was all just electrical, like actual electrical impulses being sent to your house and interpreted by the little cable box on top of your TV. That meant there was no IP addresses. There was actually no means of like two-way communication, because for your box to be able to send communication back to the station would have required an immense amount of power from your home, which just wasn't something that was possible at the time. Because there was no like phoning home or two-way comms, it means that it was really hard to find anyone who was pirating cable TV. Basically, the only way they really had was like to send someone down to test the signal strength on the lines and figure out where people had put splitters where there were not supposed to be splitters. And that takes a lot of manpower. So generally it wasn't done unless there was a huge problem going on. Also because there was only one-way communication, that meant every single home that had a cable line dropped in got the same signals sent to them, regardless of what your subscription package was. Because that's like, they had no means of like encoding addresses and routing into this stream. It was literally just like electrical, like stick your finger in the electric socket electrical. You just get those impulses. Don't do that. You just get those impulses that come out. So if you wanted cable and you didn't have a cable drop in your house, what did you do? You called the kid. Yeah. Remembers Radio Shack? Yeah, cool. This is a good crowd. This is gonna be fun. Yeah, you called the cable company and you requested service, or what you did, and like what people I know did, is you waited till the cable guy was out front hooking somebody else up, and you went outside and you pulled out a brand new $100 bill, and you said, "Hey, I'm looking to get cable service. Do you know how I can get cable service?" And he's like, "Oh, totally. Hang on, let me sign you up right now." And he just threw a splitter on the line and he ran a line to your house. If you were really enterprising, you could do that to yourself. You could go to Radio Shack, pick up some coax, what was it, RG6, and then just tap into the pole or the box in your backyard and run it straight in your house. And now you got cable because you're getting the same signal that everybody else is getting. And you still need the box. And we'll get into that in a second. And we'll get into targeting. So, like, who remembers this stuff? Yeah, sorry if there's kids in the audience. I didn't. This is a documentary on the mating habits of certain upright mammals. It's very educational. So this is what, because there was no targeting, like everyone got the same signal. That meant everyone got these signals. Everyone got the paid channels, and not just like HBO and stuff, but actually like your pay-per-view, your small time slot channels. And so they looked like this. And why did it look like this? What's going on here? It's being scrambling. It's being encrypted basically, but it's not being digitally encrypted. It's being analog encrypted. It's just what's actually happening is it's not being interpreted properly by your cable box. The signal that's coming in is of a different frequency, and I won't get into the technical details, than what your cable box is expecting. What's cool about this is your cable box, for the most part, was totally capable of decrypting this. It had all the hardware it needed inside of it. It just needed to be told to do it. And so what the cable companies did is, when you signed up for a service, it encoded your serial number, your box, into the stream that was sent out to everybody. And last I checked, even like DirecTV and Dish Network still do this because they're one-way communication systems. And if your box saw its serial number in that traffic of systems that should be decoding this, it will start decoding it. So you had the decryption system right in front of you. You just had to turn it on. And so there were various ways of causing that to happen. You could just go ahead and buy a black box if you had a few bucks, and you would just hook that up, and it was just always permanently descrambling everything. That was what most people did. That was the easiest. You could buy these on what was effectively Craigslist back in the day, the back page of the newspaper, the want ads. These people were just selling. They called them black boxes. And they were making bank off of these because they would also set them off to only decrypt specific frequencies. So you would have to buy a black box just for HBO, just for Showtime. And because they would actually just take the hardware and tweak it down to only do that. So you had to give this guy like $100 per black box, or you could build it yourself. Like I said, it didn't actually descramble anything. It just tells the main box to do it. Another thing that people would do, which was really cool, I put the wrong text in there, but they had these bullet protectors, and they called them bullet protectors because they were about the size of a 50 cal like sniper bullet. But they were shaped like a bullet, and you would just screw it into the back of your box, and then you would request like a trial service, or you would request one pay-per-view or something, and so it would it would allow in the start descrambling signal to come to your box with your box's serial number on it. But when the cable company would send out the notice to your box to stop descrambling for like these serial numbers, it would absorb that specific signal and just convert it to heat and blow it off, and it would never actually enter your box because it was analog, and that's how that worked. And so your box would basically begin descrambling everything and never receive the signal to stop descrambling, and now you've got HBO forever as long as that bullet protector's on there. Who remembers doing that for like, I want to say early 2000s, when you would get internet and you would order just internet and they'd put this little like bullet shaped thing on the line, and if you disconnected it you could get free basic cable? That's what that was. That was a bullet protector that the cable company was actually using to deny you television service, because they had to provide you that basic analog signal in order for you to get internet. And so if you wanted just internet, they actually had to give you basic cable and then put this little thing on your line that converted all the cable signals to heat. And so if you just go in your box and just unscrew this and put the lines back together, you get free cable. So this is what a lot of people I knew were doing back in the 80s. And they were having trouble hunting these people down because it was a rampant problem. Like, cable TV piracy was huge in the 80s. There were some numbers I read that said basically most people who had cable TV in their homes between like 1986 and 1990 were not paying for it. Most. The majority of the people you are providing service to are not paying you for it. So it was a huge deal. And so they're like, how do we crack down on these people without sending a truck and a dude with a signal meter down every line in America? The biggest problem they were having was people was stealing pay-per-view. And so they're like, let's start with targeting the pay-per-view people. And they did this really cool, I call it a canary thing, and it may not be the proper term, but Mike Tyson was huge in the 80s. He was around like at the height of Mike Tyson's career, 80s and 90s. Like Mike Tyson was before Michael Jordan. He was like, everyone knows Mike Tyson. You don't have to be into boxing. You know Mike Tyson. You know his record. Everyone wants to watch him fight. So whenever there was a Mike Tyson fight on pay-per-view, it was like $1 trillion, and like one dude on your block would get it, or one dude in your neighborhood, and everyone would go to his house to watch the Tyson fight, and it lasted 8 seconds because it's Mike Tyson fight. And you lost $1 trillion. And so, like, a lot of people, of course, don't want to pay for that. Like, it's expensive, but I gotta watch Mike Tyson. What am I gonna do? Well, I'm gonna steal my pay-per-view because my buddy, he has this thing and he gives him free pay-per-view, and here's how we're gonna do it. And so, using the thing I just talked about, where you get the start descramble, but you don't get the stop descramble thing, what happens if there's a pay-per-view broadcast and then it ends? What do you see on your TV after that pay-per-view broadcast ends? Normally, I should probably tell you because this is a long time ago. You would get just kind of like a scrambled signal or snow or something. It would be a scrambled signal of color bars usually, because there was nothing being broadcast at that time. So you would get start descrambling, you'd get your Mike Tyson fight. Soon as it's done, you get your stop descrambling, and you're back to this. So if you never get that stop descramble signal, what you're going to get is just like color bars, because there's nothing on the channel at that time. So what they did to catch these people is broadcast something during that color bar period that the people who were permanently descrambling wouldn't know wasn't supposed to be seen by anybody. And what they did is they offered everyone who ordered the pay-per-view, the Mike Tyson fight, that was watching it illegally, a free Mike Tyson autographed trucker hat. Which was awesome. Everyone wore hats back then, and everyone wanted a Mike Tyson hat to show that they got the Mike Tyson pay-per-view. And I saw the fight on TV, and I got an autographed hat for Mike Tyson or whatever. So the FBI, working with the cable company, set up this sting operation where, like, once the stop descrambling signal got sent down, and anybody who had legally paid for the pay-per-view was now seeing this again. Anybody who was blocking that stop descrambling signal would get a standard-looking infomercial for a Mike Tyson trucker hat that's like, hey, thanks for ordering. We're going to send you your free hat. All you have to do is call this phone number and give us your name and your home address. And it's free, and it's right to you, autographed by Mike Tyson. And so effectively, you know what happened. Everyone called in and said, hi, I'm stealing cable. Here's my name and address. Do you need anything else? Where's my hat? What's that? No, there was no hat, it turned out. Right? Yeah, like, come on. Let's at least play fair. If I'm going to go to prison, give me an autographed Mike Tyson hat. So the guys in prison know that, you know. No, it's cool, man. I like Mike Tyson, too. And so but they weren't looking for the people who were actually stealing. They were looking for the people who were selling these boxes. And so what would happen is you get a call from a Fed a few days later and be like, hi, this is, Agent so-and-so at the FBI. I have a couple questions for you. And they basically scare you into telling them where you got the box. And they were just cracking down on these guys who were making these boxes. And eventually, they did crack down on a lot of those guys, and they also, and it was just dudes in their basement who were making these. It was definitely like Mark said, you run to the Radio Shack and buy some parts, you could easily build your own. They also found that all of the cable boxes, just to get basic cable, were being sold by the dudes, like I said, who were running the trucks, the cable installers, and you could just give them $100 because none of those serial numbers were tracked. And every now and then they would do like an inventory of all the cable boxes in all of their, the installers' distribution centers and be like, tell us what you got, and then we'll compare that to the ones that are supposed to be active and the ones that aren't, and then they would send down these block lists of like, hey, if this is your serial number, you should not be getting any service, stop descrambling the basic signal. And so they would do like these huge rolling blackouts, but then all you had to do was just pay the guy another $100 for another box and keep on going. So they were very, very easy to build, like if you knew where to get the info on how to do it. And one of the ways that, the main way that I got into all sorts of stuff like this was through text files. And I mean like text files, like all one word like that. Who's that old here? I like how you notice I lingered on you long enough. So text files were literally these text files full of ASCII art like this that told you how to do sometimes illegal, vaguely illegal, sometimes normal things, usually to get things that you weren't supposed to have or to make things do things they weren't supposed to do. And this is like one of my favorite examples. This is the overhead view of if you live in like a suburb or a subdivision, you probably have one of these boxes in your backyard. This is the cable box in your backyard that's a like kind of ugly green, about waist high box that's got some numbers on it. This is the overhead view when you lift the lid on it. And so it's like, here's what you'll see. Look for this metal pole / big cable that looks like so. And each O is a terminal screw. So look for the terminal screws. It's a perfectly easy to understand diagram. So you're out there with like this thing that you printed up at work because you don't have a printer at home. And you're like, fuck. Well, let's get to work. And then your neighbors don't have cable. And then his truck is out there and he's like, what? No. He's out there for like 7 hours and you're like, it took me 2 minutes to break. Why are you out there for 7 hours? And so like these text files you would find were on the not even the predecessor to the internet. Like I call it pre-internet or proto-internet. It was on these systems called BBSs or billboard servers, bulletin board systems, which were systems in people's houses. They were standalone servers. It was usually also just their home computer. Most people did not have a second computer because you couldn't afford a second computer just to dedicate to this. It usually only had one modem, which means it was one phone number, which usually means it was also the dude's phone number. And so sometimes you'd call, like you'd go to dial into the BBS and you hear your computer go, hello? Hello? And then you'd have to pick up your phone and go, oh, I'm calling for the BBS. And you go, okay, call back in 5 minutes. And he hangs up the phone because then what he's doing is he's running the phone line over to the server, plugging it in, and like he's rushing because he knows you're going to call back. And then you call back and you get that fax machine sound. And I can say fax machine sound because I just found out fax machines are still in heavy use. So that's a thing. Jason Scott, if anyone knows Jason Scott, like archive.org, textfiles.org, that guy, he's got a really, 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 really good, really long documentary called BBS. And it's all up on YouTube. But I recommend you guys throw him a few bucks and buy the DVD set because he does a lot of incredible work. Pen testers often use his stuff a lot for OSINTs because he archives the entire internet. He just backs up the internet. I'm almost positive he runs the Wayback Machine. But also archive.org. Anytime I find floppies of old stuff, I send it to him, and he rips the floppies, he figures out what's on them, and he catalogs it properly. Please stop sending him AOL CDs. He's good. So like other things you found on these BBS servers was lists of other BBS servers, because you needed a phone number to call. And it wasn't like you could pull up the yellow pages and then just like look for BBS server and be like illegal, I'm looking for pirated software. That's this phone number. So you like these lists of phone numbers to call were just distributed around other BBS servers. You'd find your piracy hacks, you'd find your telephone company hacks and scams. This is like probably the golden age of like telephone hacking, like post Blue Box, post Captain Crunch. Like you could steal all telephone service all the way through the 80s and early 90s. The Anarchist Cookbook. Who has the Anarchist Cookbook? Who's seen it? Who's read it? Who paid for it? All right. It's funny. So I was giving a talk on the dark web at ShowMeCon 2 days ago, I think. I'm wearing my ShowMeCon shirt. I just wanted to be like the first one to wear the ShowMeCon 2017 shirt to talk at a different con. So like 2 days later, I'm like, yeah, I love ShowMeCon. So there on the dark web, like I had found somebody selling the Anarchist Cookbook for like $4. I'm like, what? And it says like Anarchist Cookbook final version. Like according to who? The author? So don't pay for the Anarchist Cookbook. Those who don't know, the Anarchist Cookbook was pretty much just like, it was a manual for how to be a terrorist in the 80s. It was literally like, here's how to make bombs out of things that in your own home. And a few computer things. It's a cool read. It's a great retro read. Just Google it. It is everywhere. If you have $6, it's on the dark web. I almost wanted to buy it from the guy. Like, good job, man. There's pornography. Man, that was a long night. Like, it was, you're talking like 9600 baud, which is, I don't know what fraction of like, what's the standard megabit for a cable connection now, 32? Like, no, this was like one low res, like 8-bit color image of what may have been a woman. And just, you'd like go make a sandwich, come back and forget what you're doing, or you leave it up and you go get a sandwich, and like, then forget what you're doing and go do something else. And then like your mom walks in the room and the image is like done downloading, but you had long since forgotten you ever even started that. And then you're like, oh, viruses! Shut it off. There was info on hacking BBSs. So like you could go on a BBS and then find text files on how to hack that BBS. Because there was a lot of people who were just like not really sure what everything was, but thought it was cool, wanted to do it, and so they would just clone a lot of the documents from other servers and just put it on theirs. Maybe vet what you're doing. Wares, which was like pirated software basically, but not always. Sometimes there was a lot of freewares, a lot of sketchy stuff people had written. There was text files on exploits, and look at the exploits I list in there. SQL injection, cross-site scripting, phishing tactics. Now I'm talking like early 90s probably down here. And this is stuff we're screwing with now. The number one security problem on the internet right now is SQLI. In 2017, SQLI, like the thing we freaked out about like 5 years ago and stopped doing and like learned how to code properly to get around it, that's been around since then. Like, since SQL basically was being used for web pages, so maybe like mid-90s. But yeah, and then you get like your more offensive software like WarDial.exe, and this is one like, if you had a BBS, you had WarDial.exe on it. Like this was like, it came with like your BBS install kit. It was like, here's your first offensive software. Use WarDial. They both threw a link to textfiles.com down there. So let's talk about WarDialing. Who knows what movie this is from? War Games, right? Got Eric excited. And so I can just go over here. Yeah, so it's named after the movie War Games, and you were usually dialing into a mainframe with it. So like that's why they called it WarDialing, because who hasn't seen War Games? All right. So this is for you. Okay, all right. We're not all good parents, Haya, and that's fine. It's totally fine. Basically, the movie War Games at one point, like he's just rolling through dialing numbers to see if he can find a computer on the other end, and he eventually does, and then the world almost ends. That's War Games. So that's your one sentence of War Games. And so that's what WarDial is named after. Somebody was like, oh, I should just write a program that does that. And they did. And then you would just feed it and you'd be like, here's a program, here's a list of phone numbers, get to work. And all it would do is go through and find which ones had a computer on the other end and just mark them. And then you'd come back like 6 days later and look at your list and your phone bill. And you would just see like, here's the ones that have computers. And then you'd have to manually go back and just dial those computers and see what they even were, see if they had logins. They didn't. And by that I mean like you were just in. So that was funny. And everyone else just got a weird call with nobody on the other end who wasn't a computer. So that was fun too. You get a lot of people, like if you had your modem speaker turned up, you just hear a lot of like people answering the phone like, hello? Hello? Is anyone there? Like people just loved to yell on the phone in the 80s and 90s. They would stay on forever. If you, oh, this is a great one. If there was authentication on the other end, you could sit there as long as you want and just beat away at it. You just admin all day and just try and figure it out. Because there was like no lockouts. There was no lockouts on these things. This was like Unix. They're running like BSD 0.5. Like the concept of lockouts was ridiculous. Like maximum 6-character passwords. It was a good time to be alive. These dudes, the 414s. This is the head of the 414s. Anyone hear of the 414s? I'm that old. I think you had to be from the Chicago area too to really pick up on them. These dudes were in Milwaukee, and they were just a group of computer hackers who had broken into some very serious stuff. They were basically the original lulzsec because they didn't really hack anything. They just used like available tools and brute forcing and just defaced things. So their main tech was literally WarDial.exe and a whole ton of default passwords, or on occasion some really well-known security exploits, which you could learn about from text files. And they had broken into a bunch of systems, including some government stuff, and defaced some things, and messed with some stuff, and downloaded some things they shouldn't have. And they had been so successful at it that this kid who was in charge of that whole hacking ring, ended up on the cover of Newsweek in, I don't know what year that was, early 90s. But yeah, got onto Newsweek for that. It's no Times Man of the Year, but it's pretty good for just literally what you do with Burp Suite now. So let's talk more about the pen testing in the 80s. There was really no LANs, no private LANs. There was no NAT at the time. Nobody had firewalls. Barely anyone had switches even. There was no like layer 2, layer 3, anything. So everything had a public IP. So if you knew the public IP address, and this is, of course, we're talking about like when the internet actually started to become a thing, everything had a public IP. And if you knew the IP address of that box, you could get in. And this is like company servers that contain your PII, your HR data, your, maybe HIPAA data, your sales data, financial data, like everything had a public IP. And so if you knew it, you could start talking to it. SSH over SSL, or I'm sorry, SSH didn't exist yet. SSL over Telnet, which was something similar, didn't exist. It was all plain text stuff. Every server ran FTP. That's how you transferred files to those servers, was FTP all day. FTP to its public address. So, and FTP ran as root, because that's what everyone did, because that's the default install and it worked. And why am I going to screw with this if it works? Just leave it alone, right? So like, what does this mean? Who's a pen tester here? Or who likes to do things they shouldn't? So like, here's your clues. So every server out there is running FTP as root, and encrypted communications don't exist yet. What's the plan? What's the attack path here? I think I wrote it up. So yeah, it's on the next slide. So like everything was used Unix, it's mostly IBM and Solaris. But anyway, like you could crash FTP And that gets your root effectively. Like, we were doing buffer overflows, and it was super easy to just do a buffer overflow back in the day. Like, you just sit there and you hold down the 0 key, and you own the server. And so, like, now, like, if it's running FTP, which everything was, and it's super easy to crash the FTP service, what does that mean? That means you're now root on this box because you held the 0 key long enough. Which is funny, because wasn't there like a Linux exploit for that bypassed the disk encryption recently? You hold 0 long enough, and yeah, good times. So we'll talk about that later. And then, because there's no such thing as encrypted communications back then, you'd fire up TCP dump and just wait for everyone else to try to log in, and just grab all their creds and then spray and pray those creds everywhere else. What was funny is you'd only capture like 6 credentials because everyone on Earth used the same 6 credentials. There was admin, password, admin. Oh no, sorry, password was too long. You only had like 6 characters to work with, so it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Samsonites. Yes. Also to save, just heck, back then you were just trying to save space, like disk space. Certain versions did have file name length limitations for sure. But yeah, and back then you're talking about like if I can drop a byte out of a file name times 4,000 files in my operating system, that's some significant disk space back then. Yeah. We'd fire up TCP dump, which is TCP/DMP back then, and I think still on most systems. And it didn't have the ASCII output that it does now, so it was still just byte stream. You had to like take that byte stream and then send it through a different utility just to extract passwords out of it. That's of course long since been fixed. Again, no account lockouts. 4 or 6 character passwords are super common. 4 character passwords were super common, and they were almost always digits. Like, it was just silly back then. Silly. Firewalls, once they started coming out, nobody knew how they worked or what to do with them. So a lot of people were literally just plugging them in and turning them on and walking away and being like, firewall. Give me $1,000. IDSs came way late in the game. Same thing. And by same thing, I mean same thing you're doing now, where you just plug them in and turn them on and be like, well, it's doing something. It's fine. I'm busy. I'm going to go back to what I'm doing. And the signatures sucked. They came with like 4 signatures. You could like, and it was signatures like, well, if somebody is sending a TCP connection, TCP open request to every port consecutively, that's probably someone who's scanning you and you should block them. And so like you could just like randomize the ports you tried connecting to, and that defeats the IDS. Like, I'm talking, these signatures were garbage. And then Microsoft released IIS because the web was really starting to become a big thing that businesses wanted to get into. And that was the best thing that had ever happened in the history of the internet and hacking. The World Wide Web superhighway was yours to command at that point. Early versions of IIS were so full of holes, combined with the fact that people really didn't know how to do any kind of secure web design at all, because it wasn't even on anyone's mind. Defacing websites was extremely common. You could hold a website or domain hostage. Like, a lot of times it was super easy, even just some DNS companies, you could just submit a request on a company's letterhead to have the DNS changed, and they would just do it, like, because a lot of them didn't even have like logins and like admin pages at the time. You just had to shoot a letter over to the DNS company and be like, oh cool, got it, no problem. And you would just redirect all this traffic to your service if you wanted. Intercepting information was easy. Dumpster diving was also a huge thing at the time. Who remembers dumpster diving? Who knows what this is from? I'll buy a Coke for anybody who can identify that movie. It's fine, you can get back to me later. I hope you've never seen it, it's awful. But I'll tell you if you want, it's not for kids. Yeah, that is a nude woman in a dumpster looking at financial data. So this was a thing that we used to do, and it's as fun as it sounds, diving into dumpsters. Like, you wouldn't do it at like food chains or anything, or like a grocery store. You were mainly doing it at like Best Buy, Circuit City. Don't do it here, please. Do it somewhere else. Basically any stores that did a lot of credit card processing and had a dumpster. Anybody work retail in the early, mid-90s? Run a cash register? Do you remember? Oh, yeah, what happened? So you remember the old imprint machines? Who remembers those imprint machines? What happened with those papers? Like, what happened with the company end of those papers? Yeah, he threw them in the trash. Who remembers running a register back in when you had the automated swipers, but you would close your till out and you would get that 400-page printout of every credit card you took that day? Yeah, and you would flip through this. I mean, I worked at, I'll call out Walgreens because I know they don't do it anymore. So at the time I worked with Walgreens, you get this 400-page printout and it had like all your transactions for the day, including all your credit card transactions, which listed the credit card information, like the full thing, everything right on that page. And all you would do is flip all the way to the end and make sure the 4 numbers all the way to the end matched up with what you're supposed to have, and you would take this stack and you would put it right in the garbage can. And then some guy would come around every night and take that garbage can and he'd put it in the big garbage can in the alley. And then I would come back and empty the big garbage can into my pickup truck. And this is back when, like, all you needed was a number and an expiration date. Like, there was no CVV. Like, this is pre-CVV. Like, the dudes like the people I know are the reason that CVV was invented. Hi, Amanda. Coming in? Just like looking at the backs of people's heads? Me too. Yeah, so just like the dark web now, like, as long as you had a credit card number, you could order anything you wanted off the TV. The TV was like your personal dark web. The TV or the back page of the newspaper, depending on how alive you needed your things to be. And then you would just send them to any kind of place that couldn't be tracked to you, such as your local abandoned house or house that was being built on your block. Like huge housing expansion in the late 80s and early 90s. Everyone had at least one house being built on their block. And so you would just put down that address, and UPS would be like, YOLO, box goes here. Yeah, and there's your, as seen on TV, piece of crap you bought, but you didn't pay for it, and so everybody won. Like if you needed the new Dorf DVD. I was hoping the Dorf joke would land. Who remembers Dorf? Don't look that up. It's a waste of your day. So then we started to have this like rise of hacker culture. Now that we had an easier means of communicating, the World Wide Web is a thing. We started to have our own forums that were being hosted on servers that we had obtained. And so there were a lot of people who wanted to get into it, just like a lot of people want to get into penetration testing now. And so there was like the old school pen testers, hackers who had been doing this forever, mad at all these young kids coming in who don't know what they're doing. And you would start getting a lot of names being thrown around. White hat and black hat was something that allegedly had started at the NSA sometime in the mid-90s, but definitely had quickly leaked its way into the hacker underground usage. So like those two terms have been around forever. They're not actually like vendor terms that people think they are. Back in the day, hackers were the good guys. Hackers were the kids in the movie Hackers. Like, hackers were the guys who were just trying to find out how things work and how to spread that knowledge around. Hackers were the guys that were on the first slide of my deck. They were the ones who fight for the users. And sometimes, yeah, they would, like, take down evil organization websites or hack into, like, financial companies and stuff and kind of do that anonymous thing where, like, really, I think they broke in and then just invented a reason for it later, like Anonymous does a ton. But the bottom line is, like, the hackers were the good guys at the time. And there was another term called crackers, which is actually coming back now as, you know, a form of, we do a lot of password cracking now. But crackers were the guys who would, they would bypass protection mechanisms and software. They were the ones who would write your keygens. They were the ones who would do the garbage stuff, like use really easy exploits to deface a website. Just like generally be assholes to everybody. They were the virus writers. They were the ones who would steal info and then use it for extortion purposes. Like, those were the crackers. And the hackers hated them for obvious reasons. It gave the hackers a bad name. I put a little rabbit hole here. The IETF Internet, what does that stand for? Internet Something Task Force. Internet Engineering Task Force actually has an RFC with the definition of hacker and cracker in it. It's right there. It's actually an IETF RFC. And so there was a big war with the hackers against the crackers. And it came to a head around Y2K. It kind of started to get a little blurry. You wouldn't dare claim to be a hacker at all, ever, around Y2K. It's a great way to get yourself doxxed and hacked. Nobody called themselves a hacker. Everyone else was a hacker. You'd be like, don't fuck with that guy, man, he's a hacker. But you never called yourself a cracker. It was like, oh no, man, I just screw around with this, or I really just play around in this realm. I'm not a hacker, man. Because as soon as you went on any of the forums and like, I'm a super elite hacker, like they immediately tested you with the fullest of their force. Like anyone calling themselves a hacker was immediately a target by the actual hackers trying to stop all this new blood from coming in. At that point, crackers were only focusing on writing key gens and password crackers, things like that. Who remembers Loft Crack? That was a big utility that came out a little bit before this from the Loft group. Loft Heavy Industries, I believe is what they called themselves. Loft Crack was still, I took a SANS course like 3-4 years ago, and they still used Loft Crack as a utility in there, and I was like, this is still valid? Somebody had recently sent Jason Scott, the archive.org guy, a floppy disk they had found that had Loft Crack on it, and had big wealth on it. I was like, that's neat. But nowadays, like, it's kind of all the same. Nobody really uses cracker now as a term at all. The hacker term is used to describe anybody ever who knows how to use a computer, or doesn't. Anybody who just can touch a computer is a hacker now. Anybody who just like accesses something they shouldn't is a hacker, even if all they did was type in the proper credentials. Or like, oh, Britney Spears' Instagram account was hacked, and it's like, no, they just had the credentials. They just typed. Her account was typed. So that's, I mean, I don't have to tell you guys how the media mashes that up. So like, we talked about a little bit about like how SQLI was been used way back then, and it's still in use today, and it's a huge thing that was a problem at the time. It still is a problem. There's tons of stuff like that out there. And there was when Windows 8 came out, and I was like, I had this in '96. It was called AOL. Those are 2 actual screenshots. This is going to be a good time. My favorite example of that is the land attack, and I don't think anyone remembered this because it wasn't a big deal at the time, unless you were a sysadmin. And so you could DOS a system by just sending a SYN packet where the destination IP and the source IP are the same. And the system would go, what? And then you'd essentially set up a loop. It would either set up an endless loop inside the NIC and use up all the computer resources and lock it out, or it would just crash the system, something would break. It affected everything, like NT, Unix, like some printers were affected by this. Like everything was susceptible to this land attack. It was discovered to affect Windows 98 through Server 2003, and somebody found it in 2005. Like nobody had reported that until 05. Nobody had tried like setting the source and the destination IP as the same and seeing what happens until like 05. And maybe they did, and they're like, oh ha, it broke the system. What was really funny about it is it had been found once, and everybody patched it. All these operating systems patched it. They're like, okay, fine, we know why it's caused it. We'll make sure that doesn't happen. When they were, the reason it affected server, I think it was Server 2008, was found to be susceptible to it again. That was the next one, right? 2012? Anyway. The next version was found to be susceptible to it, and somebody had like sent a message to the Nmap mailing list. What's the Nmap mailing list called? SecList? That one, I can't remember. So, saying like, hey, I'm seeing this weird thing. If I set the source IP and the destination IP, this happens. You guys seeing this? And then somebody came back and they're like, dude, that was a problem from like years ago. And they went in, and everybody tried it, and everyone's like, yeah, this is locking my system up. This is a total like super easy DOS attack. You could just spray across the internet and mess a lot of people up. Holy cow, how did this get out? And like, how did it happen? And we patched it, and then it got out again. What's going on? And so years and years later, so Microsoft did fix it anyway, and it's all fine now, but years and years later, they put it, one of the guys who worked on it at Microsoft put up this cool blog post where he was like, the way it happened again was, we were looking at the old '03 source code and seeing what can be migrated over to the new versions and what should just be dumped and rewritten. And one of the devs found this commented out section that was affected by that flaw. But he didn't know that because there was no comment above it saying, holy crap, don't ever uncomment this. And so he's looking at it and he's like, no, oh, that makes sense. That's a good line of code. This is a good idea. Why didn't somebody comment this out? Why did somebody comment this? So he uncomments it and he's like, let's test it out. And they all tested it. He's like, yeah, this works. We're cool. All right, cool. We're done. So like you just uncommented it and this like ancient piece of source code from like Windows fucking NT ended up in like server 2008 and we had this whole problem all over again. And that reminded me of this quote from a SANS instructor, Tim Medine, who's a really cool guy. When he teaches his pen testing class, he's like, do you wish like you could still use an old exploit like MS-08067? Like, do you miss those days? Just wait. Just hang out. It'll all be valid again. 2017 SQLI is the most exploited flaw on the internet. What's that? How do you sue an old exploit? Also, it's not even like, it's not an exploit. It's shitty developing. Let's stop calling it flaws and exploits and vulnerabilities. It's shitty developers causing the problem. What we got through there? So like, yeah, that's everything. Like, SQLI is as old as SQL. It's as old as JavaScript. Like, we didn't call it like, cross-site scripting. We called it sending funny messages to our friends. We didn't even call it phishing. We called it tricking people into giving us their passwords by creating fake email pages. Like, we had really long sentences for the things we were doing. Like webmail, like, oh my god, I did this as a gag to my friends. Like, I would just clone the Yahoo webmail login and then like email them that HTML file as an attachment, and they would open their email and click on the link and it would pop up the login page and they would just go, oh, must have logged me out, garbage internet. And then log in again and it would send me the creds, and then I would go in and I would just send them like, haha, I'm in your email, lols. Hacking. I've been doing that forever. Like, that's how all phishing campaigns, well, most of them work now. It's like you click a thing and you get a login page and now I got your credentials. Like, I was doing that when I was 14 years old. As a gag. Now somebody's giving me a paycheck for it. That's weird. This stuff's super old. Like, I remember when people were freaking out about SQLI in like 2000, what was it, Andy? 2011, 2012, when like the great SQLI scare hit. When we invented the term SQLI, it was like maybe one of the first like big named vulnerabilities, because at least it had like a notice on it or a little acronym for it. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, I've been doing that for 20 years. Why is everybody freaking out? And it was just because, I don't know, the media had gotten their hands on it. Or SQL Slammer had come out in I think 2003 maybe. And SQL Slammer was a virus that just ran through and exploited very easy, like 1 = 1, and then just do directory traversal or drop etc password or etc shadow. Just basic scripts like that. SQL Slammer is now flooding across the internet again. Still doing the exact same thing, and it's incredibly successful because we're still not doing secure coding. But like, so let's like, why wasn't that a big deal until at least 5 years ago? Up until modern times, like super recent times, it was mostly like me, kids pulling pranks, one-off criminals. Organized crime was working on adware at the time. Like, we all remember the adware scares in like 2000 through 2009. It was just adware central. It was all about pop-ups and ad revenue. Like, how many pop-ups can I throw on this dude's computer? That was the big thing. DDoS hostage was working. Like, people were definitely paying off DDoSes. We're still doing that, which we shouldn't, but we are. The countries we're afraid of that do the APTs now, like China and Russia, which probably aren't actually doing anything, They had limited or no internet access. Like any of those countries where the rule of law was not really in play also did not have any kind of like internet infrastructure. So not a huge deal from them. And e-commerce wasn't that big. The big e-com boom happened like post Y2K, post like .com boom. It was 03 through like 07 is really when stuff started ramping up, and it wasn't until like, again, super recent times that you could buy anything you wanted online. Like I remember when Amazon was a bookstore, and I think one of the first things they started selling that wasn't books was like plants. And I was like, who the fuck's ordering plants from the bookstore? It's gonna be dead. I don't want weird bookstore plants. What's this for, my dorm? Yeah. And now, like, Amazon's where you go to buy anything. Like, you don't even go to Newegg anymore. So, like, there wasn't a lot of stuff to steal if you did break into these e-com companies, if you did get past the sites and were able to grab credit cards from them. Like, a lot of people still weren't buying anything online. I think I was working retail up through 2007, and the internet was still not, like, a big competitor to us. And I was working in a computer store. And yeah, you could go to Newegg on occasion when they had good sales and get a good deal on a hard drive, but like most people still wanted to come in and touch stuff and see what they were doing and just put their hands on it. And so like, it's 07. Like everyone in this room remembers 07. You remember 07? 2007? It was a long time ago. A little young. Yeah, you, not Garrett. Garrett's actually like 30, he just looks like he's 10. Yeah, so that wasn't a big deal. The word cyber had not been really applied to this yet. It wasn't a marketable term that we could use as a vendor to scare the shit out of anybody with a C in their title. And it's just, nobody gave a crap until then. So about 5-10 years ago, it became a huge deal because most of those things had stopped to be true. Why is it still a problem now? It's because even now, even no matter how much screaming that we're doing, the problem is we're screaming at each other about it instead of the right people. Security is still an afterthought in most companies, especially companies that produce a product that is connected to the internet, IoT, what have you. What happens most of the time is we create a product, and not just a physical product, sometimes it's a software product. I think most often it's a software product. And then if you're lucky, it might get tested to be secure. So they go, here's the finished product. Can you guys please test this finished product, this finished black box product? I work for a security, pen testing firm, and we get asked that all the time. They go, hey, we got this application. Can you guys test it? And then we go, yeah, do you want to do a secure code review too? That's X amount of dollars, and we'll also go step by step through the code and make sure you follow all the best practices for that. And they go, no, just test the app. Okay, that's not a great idea, but like that's like the best case situation in most places. And without yeah, I can do a pen test on an app, and I can spend 80 hours on it. I'm never going to give it a 100% clean rate because there's no way you can do that. Like there's always a chance that there's something I overlooked. There's always a chance that the 10 people you paid to look at this overlooked the same thing 10 times. Because it might be something super obscure that's super hard to exploit, but you got a 1 in 10 chance of it working, and someone's going to figure that out one day, and then you're screwed because you didn't have anyone actually look at the code. And then speaking of the code, we're not having our developers learn secure coding. Like we were for this brief period. Everyone was all about it. PCI requires it. Requires what, secure code training every year, I believe, or 2 years. But like, it requires the most basic of things. Like I worked for a company where your secure coding training was like, we ran you through WebGoat. And then told you how to sanitize input, and that counted as secure development training. It was like a 1-day class we did. And so like we freaked out when SQLI came around and everybody started talking about secure coding practices. And then we just like stopped somewhere. Like 2-3 years ago, I don't know if everyone just got burned out on it or we said, okay, cool, everybody knows, we can stop talking about that and pretend it was never a thing that happened like Germany does with World War II. Like, no, those were dark days. We lost a lot of the records, but it's fine now, don't worry. Because now, like I said, for the 6th time in this talk, like, SQLI is the biggest problem in the internet right now as far as, like, security bypasses go. This was, like, the one thing that started the whole, like, let's yell about secure coding practices was SQLI. Why? I don't even have a rest of that sentence. I'm just angry. Why? Well, how do we allow this to occur? The Internet of Things is like, of course, overall the worst offender. We all joke about that. Like it's the new butt of every joke. You could just go, oh yeah, but IoT. And then everyone laughs, like no matter what the situation was. Go, oh, yeah, my refrigerator's on the internet. Ah, you're right. We're all gonna die. This refrigerator's gonna mine enough bitcoins to buy a nuclear weapon. And then it's just gonna push the button. But good on it, because I would too. If we ever hit that point, that's what needs to happen. Just scorched earth policy. Start over. So like the big problem with the Internet of Things is so I was talking to somebody on Twitter who would hit me up and was like, hey, I found a flaw in my rice cooker. And it's not even funny, like it's a valid sentence. That's very much a thing. He said I found a flaw in my rice cooker, and then I commented, that's a funny sentence. And he goes, here's the thing, can you confirm, is this legitimate? I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, that's a problem. And it basically allowed, if I recall, once the rice cooker was attached to your LAN, you could connect to the rice cooker, and then you just had full LAN access. And I'm like, yep, that's terrible. And so he hits up Black & Decker, who had made the rice cooker, and they said, yeah, that's terrible. And so long story short, Black & Decker is like, but we didn't make that board that's in there. Like, we'd have to get new firmware from whoever made that board for us, which is Company X in Taiwan. You go to Company X in Taiwan, and Company X goes, we made that board 6 years ago. Like, we're not making new firmware for that. Like, you guys can do a recall and buy our new boards that don't have that problem. But we're not going to make, I'm not going to take my resources to code firmware from some board from 6 years ago that you guys bought. And that's the problem. Like, that's why we don't see a lot of this IoT stuff being fixed. Like, who's the FOSCam? Like, the FOSCam cameras, it's like every 6 months they got a new one, and it's got the same freaking flaw on it. Like, there's unauthenticated RTSP, so you can just watch everybody's video feeds. And hard-coded passwords, like, they've been doing that forever. And that's not getting fixed, and it's because like there's no secure coding going on in any of these IoT plants, because a lot of it is industrial engineers who learn just enough coding to be able to handle the next wave of electronics, which is electronics that have built-in CPUs. They sure as shit aren't learning secure coding. They barely learned C. Like, they're not going to learn the nuances of C and to be able to handle, they're not going to learn security things like, hey, you shouldn't allow this thing full LAN access, or you shouldn't allow people who connect to get LAN access through it. No. This is a guy who designs PCBs who happened to learn C. And so that's the whole IoT problem, and I have no solution for that other than just yell at them to do secure coding. And I hope that's working, because like the whole thing about yelling about IoT is like the big thing right now. And it worked for SQLI until we shut up about it. So maybe just don't shut up about IoT. I think we have to just keep complaining and keep making fun of it and stop buying it. And, the upside to living in a capitalist society, at least, is that we get to vote with our dollars, and I think a lot of us forget that. So vote with your dollar. Stop buying this crap. Tell your friends to stop buying this crap. Stop buying this crap for your parents. That's what I see everyone doing. Like, I never put this fucking rice cooker in my house, but my mom really needs a rice cooker. She's old. Nobody wants her data. Still sends emails with like 16 colors in them. Says, please forward to Jim, haha. And so a lot of that also just comes from us, like, we need to push our products to market as quickly as possible to get ROI and all the money we spent on development. This has been a problem forever. This is my favorite example of this is Bluetooth. Like, who remembers Bluetooth in like the early 2000s when it was like the most exciting garbage technology that had ever existed? Bluetooth was the old IoT as far as like cool idea, awful implementation. It did, like, there was all kinds of compatibility issues. You had a new version of Bluetooth out like every 4 days, and you had to like look at the box and be like, oh, this Bluetooth receiver works with version 1.2 and 1.4, but not 1.3. I have this headset as a 1.3, but I can flash it, and then it will work with 1.5 and 1.6, but not 1.2 or 1.4. Fuck. And then they would take it to the retail store I worked at and be like, make these things work. And I go, I can't. It's Bluetooth. Stop with the Bluetooth. Just use the wire. You're right there. You're right there. I still use wired headphones. You're right there. It's like we have these watches now. Everyone's got their like connected watches. Who's got a connected watch in here? Yeah, but one of those you didn't have when you came to this conference. Good work. That's how you own a watch. You just take it. And it's like, we've got these connected watches. Like, your phone's in your pockets. Like, we are too lazy now to, like, do this. It's in my other pocket. Why doesn't women's clothing have pockets? Yeah, forget this talk. That is a huge problem, and I'm not even kidding. As a man who has the... Yeah, Mark has to carry around one giant pocket strapped to his shoulder. Well, one giant grouping of pockets. Yeah, as a... This is valid. I hope the audio picked that up. That's completely valid. That's to reiterate for anyone who didn't hear, women have to wear connected watches because their clothing does not have any pockets and they don't know where their phone is in the one giant pocket they're required to carry around. Why doesn't somebody tell me why women's clothing doesn't have pockets? Let's go. IoT? Ah, it's funny because IoT. Go higher. That was, nailed it. Oh, shit. He marked my phone. Yeah, so anyway, we all want these things as soon as possible. We want them to work as good as possible, of course, but we're willing to have them work okay if we can get them faster. We have to have a new iPhone every freaking year. We have to have a new Android version every 6 months. And we're always mad because nothing works quite right. Like, at least Apple, like, everyone makes fun of Apple. They're like, oh, their crap's a year behind, 2 behind. Like, Android had that 2 years ago. What the hell? Yeah, I had an Android 2 years ago. It didn't fucking work. Yeah, it had NFC 2 years ago. You ever try to use it? No, you didn't, because nobody ever tries to use NFC. But man, you bragged about having it. And then once Apple got it, like, everybody forgot NFC was even a thing because it's a stupid garbage technology. It doesn't work. But man, we got to have these things out now. And if we don't get it now, we'll buy it later. But the manufacturers don't hear or see that. They don't believe it because, I mean, especially as a manufacturer, like, you got to get that phone out, especially in the Android realm, before somebody else gets that phone out. Like, Google's got to get that Nexus out before Samsung gets the Galaxy S20 Extreme out. It's got a curved glass, this curved screen. It goes all the way to the back, and it's just you could read the news like this. Yeah, right. And it's slippery. It's like a bar of soap. It's just a frictionless. Yeah. Well, it's just don't drop your phone. You don't know that. So, yeah, everyone drops their phone. We still don't have phones you can drop. It's like 2017, everyone drops their phone, and we haven't even figured out that bit. Like, yeah, we had phones you could drop in the 90s all the way to like 03. When did Nokia stop producing those bricks? Yeah. They still do? Oh, I gotta go to the store. I gotta wrap this up. Yeah, so like we're stuck in this realm of, like, as consumers where we need everything immediately and we don't care if it doesn't work great. Stop buying things that don't work great. Be patient. That was really distracting. And go back to your companies and yell at the right people. Don't yell at your own team. Don't complain to each other. Don't come here and give a talk like I'm doing to a bunch of people who know all of these things already. Don't come to this echo chamber and tell us, oh, we gotta focus more on secure coding. Who here didn't know that we need to focus on secure coding? Like, yeah, the developers. Are there developers here who are embarrassed to raise their hand? You knew, though. That's why, yeah. Everybody give it up for Eric. He's definitely a developer. This is your first InfoSec-Con? This is his first Information Security Con. And he's looking for work as a developer. He makes maps. And he came here to learn more about security in general because he knows that that's a critical part of developing anything. He's coming to InfoSec-Cons to learn this stuff. Everyone else here is coming to hear the same stuff they already knew or maybe learn how to hack a Toyota. Which is like, all right, it's neat, but what are we doing? Take this information that you're learning here, or that you've already learned here 10 times over, make sure it gets to the people at your company who need to hear it. Make sure that you're doing something in the culture of your company to push forward secure development. And like, so even if you don't make software applications at your company, like you have websites, you have people in your company probably who do web development. And once again, SQLI is the biggest problem on the internet. So it's not like you have some like low amount of resources to be able to like train these people on how to do it. It's like, just sanitize input. Like, that's the fix for SQLIs. You sanitize input, and then we're done here. But that's being forgotten somehow. And so I don't know if we have started resting on our laurels because we're all like, oh yeah, we work in InfoSec. We're so cool. We make so much money. Everything's the best thing ever. And we're getting lazy. Like, we still have jobs. We still have to go to work, and we still have to make sure that things are secure. And that's not just a matter of like looking at the logs every day and then typing it and setting alerts for people doing wacky things. Like, there's this whole other half of the company we're forgetting, which is making sure everyone else is being secure. Like, we'll do our user awareness training for like anti-phishing and stuff, but we won't do user awareness training for our devs. Like, we'll do the minimum required for PCI, which is like show them how to use WebGoat, and then leave. And it's just not happening. And we're not having penetration tests done on our applications, especially not on our intranet applications. Nobody is pen testing the stuff inside their LAN. Like, they're only spending that money on stuff that's internet facing. Meanwhile, like, I'm using NSA exploits to break into your company like nothing, and then I'm in, and then you have like 600 vulnerable intranet sites where I can suck out every last piece of PII that has ever been attached to that company's name since 1997, because SQLI. So start focusing on that, please. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm Johnny Christmas. If you want to hire me to come screw up your LAN, I'm always available. There's our website. You can hit us up. Shout outs to BurbSec. Go BurbSec. Yeah. And there's my GitHub where you can find the slides and talk to us. So thanks a lot for coming, guys. I hope I yelled at you enough today.